Good morning, everybody. It's Steve Brown from Mirae Asset Securities, Mirae Asset Live. Joining me this morning, we have our company's Head of Research, Mr. Minh, to give a timely update on AGM results, macro, some Q1 news, and market outlook for the rest of 2021. Minh, thank you for joining us this morning.
Oh yeah, good morning, Stephen and our esteemed investors.
Thank you. Minh, a couple of things have come to light. The Asian Development Bank has just come out on April 28th and announced an upgrade growth forecast for Vietnam to 6.7%, which is basically in advance of the National Assembly's target of 6%, and it's also in advance of the government's official target of 6.5%. So very bullish there. It's forecasting growth in 2022 might also hit 7%. So for the remainder of this year plus next year, it's one of the most outperforming forecasts for ASEAN. Mm-hmm. So what we might discuss first, the catalysts that you see for that announcement, and where you see the key areas in macro for 2021.
Yeah, I think that one of the catalysts for macroeconomics in Vietnam is about the COVID-19 pandemics. In this country, the government has been successfully in containing the outbreak, and even though in a neighboring country like Cambodia, Thailand, or even in India, the pandemics there has been like increasingly expanded, but in Vietnam we almost have here. That's it, the key issues for any outperformance of the GDPs, of the export, import, of the consumption. All are very important for supporting a higher GDP growth rate for this year. And in addition, I see a kind of like an upward momentum of GDP growth. Stephen, did you know that last year in Q1 the GDP growth only like 3%, around 3%, and this year we in the first quarter the GDP growth almost 4.5%. So in terms of percentage point, that means we have a 50% higher. And I believe that this kind of momentum can be extended to the second quarter and the third and even fourth quarters of this year. To supporting the GDP growth, in addition to the containing the pandemic, we also have some kind of like industrial production gaining. Our PMI stay above 53 points, which is higher than the threshold of 50. And every time when PMI is increased higher than the 50, that means showing an expansion in industrial activities. And yet, in addition to PMI, I witnessed that the export import also improving, with the exported growth at the rate of like totally grow at about like 22% increasing, and the import is about like 27% increasing. And this growth rate of export and imports are I can say that very impressive. Where you know that why I say impressive, because during the low growth rate of GDP, many exporting and importing activity has been postponed or cancelled in many countries in the world. But in Vietnam, the activities are continue and occur with the higher pace. And those kind of like export imports, I think that we support a higher export growth rate for Vietnam in this year and in the following year too.
To expand on your comments there, the ADB on the 28th noted that the export turnover in Q1 increased by 7%, and also export of goods to the US, mainly TMT related, mobile phones, components, textiles, rose 25%. Imports up 3.6%, mostly component parts, which go into those subsequent exports, derived from China and South Korea predominantly. The foreign reserves are also noted by the ADB to be at record highs, approaching 5 months worth of imports now. It's well over 4.2, and public debt is under control. It's roughly similar levels to Q1 2019.
Yeah.
So it's almost as if for Vietnam, the COVID pandemic was able to be very, very well controlled without too much impediment to export or to debt levels for the country.
Yeah.
Talking about all of that then, that's good momentum for Q1 heading into Q2. We might now just start to have a look at some of the news that's come out in the AGM sphere. If we look at some of the banks, some of the real estate companies, then some of the retail and consumer companies, and you can also do a bit of a dive into the Q1 results on those.
Yes, yes. The investor in general are expecting to see the house listed firms perform in the first quarter, and I have a very good news for investors today. That is, amongst about like 400 listed firms in wholesale, the sales rose about 47%. I believe that's is a high record for the first quarter of any years in the past. More interestingly, the net income growth increased at about like 162%. This is also out my imagination, because we suffer a kind of like the pandemic, but the growth and the net income still serves as a very high rate. And among these, among these firms, I separate into two groups. The first classification of banking firms. The banking firms perform very well. For their net income, this quarter they grow at 78%. In comparison to the number of last year, only 45% growth. So for banking firm, the net income growth almost double in terms of the growth rate. For non-banking firms, the net income growth even more interesting, more higher. They grow at 89% for non-banking firms, and the majority is coming from some key sector among the listed firms. For example, materials, for example, real estate, and financial service. For financial services, the net income rose at 109%. So I can say that this year, in the first quarter, the net incomes will double for financial service firms. And for the real estate, the net income almost triple. Yeah, and for materials like Hòa Phát, Hòa Sen, and some steel production company, their net income grow at almost 100%, so almost double.
Some have a combination too, don't they? Like Viglacera. Viglacera, they do materials, plus they also do industrial parks. So they have a bit of a win-win on both counts in that area. Talking about some of the real estate companies, we had recently Miss Jung, the acting CFO of Novaland, on, and when we had her on, it was not too long after your real estate analyst desk published the buy recommendation on Novaland. It was target price about 88,200 at the time, and on April 1st it was trading at 80,000 a share. It's now trading at around about 122,000 a share, so well done on that one. We saw that company come out and have their AGM, on the 28th as well. Now with that, they were talking about their outlook, for the April 27, they were talking about their gross development value of their land bank that they've been acquiring strategically over the years, based on models, what they've done with Aqua City, could be as high now as up to $45 billion over the next 10 years or so, which is quite spectacular when one looks at the current valuation of the company in terms of shares on issue. That aside, though, they've had a lot of good news coming through about eliminating the land use rights certificate hurdles for their CBD proximate towers that they've had. So in addition to that, all of their other resort areas, Nova World, Fantiet, Mirae, Dalat, and so on, are all starting to come on stream now. So I think your analysts made a pretty good call on that one. I'll look forward to seeing how the update goes now that the Q1 results have been announced. VHM, they announced on the 28th as well, if we stay in real estate for a moment there. Revenue in Q1 2021, double that of Q1 2020. So a lot of that was due to real estate transfer revenue, which is part of their overall group strategy, of course, to sell some of their big land banks. But the fact remains that it's certainly looking like it's getting its act together now, which is a good thing, given that it has had a little bit of a hiccup in terms of net profit. That was still down in a low double-digit way, around 28% Q1, I think, versus last period. When you were talking about banks before, the Tier 1 banks for sure have had a stellar time of it. Some of the Tier 2 banks, such as VIB, such as OCB, OCB has had a very good result recently. They announced that they would be looking at doing a share issuance of quite some magnitude given their shares on issue and market cap. And they've just recently had the Japanese bank join as a strategic for them. So if we now move on to the consumer and retail stocks that you find of interest that you've had a look at in recent times, we had DigiWorld on. They had a great result. If you'd like to maybe touch on FPT, DigiWorld, Mobile World Group, Masan, Vinamilk, which unfortunately has come off a little bit. I think it's been oversold, but I'm interested in your thoughts.
You've just mentioned banking, construction materials, and real estate, and some consumer stocks. And Stephen, do you think that what is the key catalyst beside the fundamental factors like net income to drive the stock price increase significantly recently? For example, Novaland, for example, I believe that there's this year in 2021 there are so many good news for listed firms in Vietnam. The first one is about the interest in Vietnam remain at quite low level, and so that's why the consumers or the investor or even the home buyer can have affordable interest rate to acquire more residence houses. For banking, they also enjoy a low cost of capital to support their clients with a moderate lending interest rate. And during even though we call pandemic time, we so-called pandemic time because pandemic still here and there. The government's policy can have some kind of like priority to support the manufacturers, to support the laborers, to maintain their jobs and their market, and their sales and their business performance. But I mean that together with the supporting policy, the the natural factors, for example, like the price of the houses, can support the revenues of the real estate firms. The price of the materials, I mean, for example, steel, also increasing. So, and therefore, in terms of the quantity of the output zone, and the price of output zone also increasing. So they enjoy like some kind of like the effect from both quantity increase and the price increasing, coming from the resulting from the demanding factor of the markets. And in Vietnam, I see quite like some kind of favorable conditions for them to maintain a high rate, not only this year but maybe next year too.
Okay. Now the other things, we've had some new research out from your desks. If we start with Vinhoan, that's VHC ticker. In the Pangasius, well, a species of catfish and seafood area, you're quite bullish on that. You've got upside 20% plus. If you'd like to just talk about where you see that stock potentially coming through for investors to have a bit of a focus on.
Vinhoan, their key products are char fish, and the majority of their products are exported to like Europe, like US, for example. And did you remember that last year, in the first quarter, the COVID starting from, and that's why there's some kind of like cancellation of their export orders. And last year they Vinhoan suffered from kind of like the cancellation of buy from buyers. But this year, even the pandemic is still out there, but the export activities running well. And I have a chance to work with like the Association of the Seafood Processing in Vietnam, and I find that the number of containers exported to the US, to Europe, for the fishery products are increasing significantly, and almost about 30% increase in the volumes of exported. And that's why I believe that we predict the revenues from their key exported products gaining from this quarter, from the first quarter of this year, and maybe maintain for the second and the last one, the third one. And this year we can say that is a year for fishery manufacturers, because the fish is a kind of like a healthy food. Moreover, it's quite like how can I say easy make to cook. Just they don't need to make anything. Just put in the microwave, as available to cook simple food. And that's why the demand for exported fish is quite good. Moreover, the exported price of the fishery, Vietnamese fish, is quite competitive in comparison to China and other competitors.
They sell to China too, don't they? One of the biggest customers is actually export markets is China after the US. So for sure. Now the other one, P&J, the jeweler. On the 17th of March, your desk came out with a recommendation on that one. The company last year, it had outperformance versus its smaller peers, particularly unlisted peers. They had a bit of a hit on the chin with P&J Silver, and they closed a few stores there. But the outlook for the business is tracking quite well. The thing that strikes me with P&J, it's got a very strong presence in the south, and the north appears to be still a frontier market for them in relative terms, you know, for a Vietnamese company. So I think they've got pretty good potential to one day regionally expand up in the north, respecting that there's a lot of incumbent players up there already, but the north accounts for less than 20% of its overall store count, whereas the south is obviously more than 50% of revenue, and in fact, according to your research, 36% of its store locations are Ho Chi Minh City urban conurbation based. So in relative terms, I think there's quite a lot of organic intra-Vietnamese growth for its stores. AGM on the 17th of April, they had they want to open 40 to 45 new stores, so that underscores that, in my opinion. Where do you see that style of stock with increasing GDP per capita and a bit of a recovery situation?
Yeah, for P&J, I think that P&J has successful in recovering from a restructure. You know that they find some store are not profit, and now they modify, they close some unhealthy branches, but they develop more. They focus on like some kind of like convenience store for silvering products. And one more thing is about it. P&J is about the ERP management. Previously, when they grow, they see that the ERP is very important for consumer products like silver and gold products. And last year they successful in implementing an ERP software to manage to forecast the demand, to predict the performance of a store, and by that management, I believe that the quality of the management of P&J is increasing significantly and more effectively, and they can look like they can forecast which store should be developed more and which area should have higher demand very quickly, and by that way, I think that is a very modern and practical view on management.
Sure. And that's a relatively new part of their strategic enhancement of their business operations. On the 28th of April, they celebrated their 33rd business birthday.
Wow.
So the ERP platforms only come in the last couple of years of this, you know. So I think you're right. You know, they're getting more and more sophisticated in their business operations. They want to expand factory number 2 as well. That was announced. So I think you'll find that we'll probably hear quite a bit more of positive news from them this calendar year. Mobile World Group and FPT, they both had pretty good results too. They usually do, particularly Mobile World Group. Now, with that, Diamond ETF, Dragon Capital's Diamond ETF is seen as a workaround for foreign investors to get exposure to both of those stocks, but they can also be bought on market sometimes or off market via an SPA for larger blocks. The related commerce news of late has been SK of Korea having a big look at Masan's Vincommerce. They announced that they wanted to buy, or will be buying, $410 million worth. They signed a contract in April for that already to buy 16.26% of Vincommerce. So where that company comes into play, I attended the AGM for Masan in Sapa, as did you. We both attended, and we both sat quite excitedly listening to the board of directors talking about their vision for rolling out Masan stores, convenience stores with SKUs that outperform the number of SKUs to say a 7-Eleven or Circle K or GS25. They were talking as high as 10,000 stores by 2025 and up to 20,000 franchised stores as well in addition to that. If they could get that, it would be a spectacular outcome. What are your thoughts on Masan in that regard? SK will give them a lot of additional firepower, a lot of power to help expand their business there in that area. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that Masan is go on the right track in expanding their market shares, and with the support from expertise from SK, I believe that they can they can achieve the new store, the new convenience store in the city and in the rural area too. And by franchising the store in the rural area, I believe that is a good way to expanding for very fast and for a short time. And the more interesting about Masan is about they not only development a store, and the convenience store is defined by Masan from now on. The convenience store doesn't not only sell the necessary stuff, for example fish sauce or instant noodles, or they have planned to develop the store become say one touch point, one desk point for many services, for example financial services. So I mean,
through
farmers,
their Techcom Bank affiliation and
of course,
investment.
Farmers can come to the store and then make a financial transaction, not only buying the stuff but also lending the money, for example, and they make some kind of like payment services. So the customer base of Masan will increase significantly within a short periods. That's an interesting point, and by that way they will conquer and dominate the market.
Yeah. So they definitely do have a unique competitive advantage in achieving that vision through the Techcom Bank shareholding and good business working relations they have with them.
And I have an idea, just an imagination, that if they lend to those people, you believe that the income not only come from the selling the stuff, but also from the financial services. With Masan, for example, loan services, for example, and with the support from the Techcom Bank's facilities, I believe that they have some kind of like fee or like subscription or some kind of services.
There's no reason to say the franchisees selling SKUs that are Masan related using Techcom Bank services could then also become Techcom Bank clients who might take car loans, mortgages, student loans.
And this kind of services is very necessary in the rural area, because the farmers and rural people can have some kind of like they farm the harvesting is quite seasonal. They have to invest for some season and they have to collect.
It helps take them away from the black market lending at exorbitant rates.
Right, with a lower
seen as a good community lender, which helps lift the livability and business viability of a lot of the unbanked community out there. So I think it's we sat in at the AGM and I was very impressed by listening to basically most of the board's comments on how they have their vision to not only sell Masan noodles, fish sauces and so on, but like you just mentioned, the entire rural lending banking quotient, which unfortunately for still quite a few people is unbanked, cash based, and often at a higher interest rate that makes what they're doing a problematic affair. They could have a much higher livability and quality of life if Masan delivers that vision that they've spoken of recently at their AGM. With the other consumer stock, I'll just get your thoughts, because we had a target price buy on your desk for Vinimilk, 124,100, and the stock today closed at under 95. And I saw recently HSBC came out just the other day with a buy rec on it at 140. So that's one of the highest that I've seen on Bloomberg. And okay, I agree with your reaction. I think it might be a little bit toppy, that one. But if we have a look at our house recommendation at 124. That's a more reasonable price.
Yeah.
It hasn't been at these levels since way back July, August last year now.
Yeah.
You know, for a consistent period of time. And what are your thoughts on? They had their AGM this week. What are your thoughts on that?
You know that Vietnamese is a good fundamental firms. Their revenues is has some sort of sign up recovery this year and this quarter, and Vietnamese is expanding by acquiring some affiliates. For example, the recent M&A is about GTN Food, and I think that in addition they can also acquire some farms in Australia, New Zealand, and by that kind of expanding, they will have more support for their input for the source of milk under control. But I see that the Vietnamese is quite underpriced at the moment because the selling pressure from foreign investor. In Vietnam, you know that they prefer some kind of like high growth firms, whereas Vietnamese growth is less than 10% per annum. So in that sense, Vietnamese is also some kind of is less preferred to other firms. But my own view is believe that in the long term, Vietnamese is a very good one, very essential for a country like Vietnam when the consumption of milk is quite low in comparison to the world.
Sure, even to regional neighbours like Thailand, and then it's less than half per annum to South Korea.
Yeah.
So I think organic growth, they don't really have to look at too much international export activity if they focus on increasing the public consumption from children to elderly with their SKUs. They will naturally weather out any recent hiccup in the share price and just increase sales, increase revenues, increase the capabilities of the company to then go into Laos and Cambodia further. I'm not sure if they'll go too deeply into Australia or New Zealand. If they expand Cambodia and Laos well enough, they'll have huge dairy cows just a day or two away in transportation terms from Vietnam, which is a lot easier to manage than something going on in New Zealand or Australia. But having said that, they do have board presence already on a company in New Zealand. So they are an interesting stock. I think if we look at the large blue chips that have been very toppy, this has been one that has been quite sold down in recent times, and I'm a bit of a contrarian investor myself, and I like the idea of a good quality company that the market, like you said, they tend to shoot for high returns often, but you need a balanced portfolio, and I think as a core portfolio holding, I agree for the long term. It's hard to beat and hard to overlook. It's still got nearly 200 international institutional investors in it.
And you know that sometimes the flavor of investor a little bit changing. Previously, I observed that investor have some kind of long-term views, but recently, especially during the COVID time, I see that the view of the investor become quite short. They prefer some kind of like high growth firm, also high have a return for a short period. They prefer that kind of stock recently. That's why Vietnamese stock is quite like under pressure of selling.
Okay, now the last things to wrap up, we've got low inflation, we've got a stable currency, just like the last time we chatted. GDP growth forecasts are now outperforming since the last time we had a chat. The ADB is probably almost the most bullish out of anybody, including the government, in how they view things for Vietnam. Fitch, Moody's, they're both also bullish on Vietnam. So it'll be very interesting to see where you think the second half will go. you're of the opinion that it'll all be very positive for Vietnam, no major hiccups to come?
I assume that the GDP and the macroeconomics continue to be upside with the higher GDP growth rate in the second half of this year, because I expected that if the COVID is controlled in Vietnam, the transportation services and the hotel and hospitality services will become like recovery from the second half this year. And even during, even during the holidays, the National Day of Vietnam and the Union Day of Vietnam, there are so many tourisms. I mean, for local tourisms have been travel a lot, and I believe that with this kind of activity can support the hospitality and the transportation, like the air companies like Vietnamina, Vietnam Airlines, Vietjet, or even Bamboo something. And I think that that's the support for the business result for the listed firm in wholesale.
And Vietnam Airlines, the government's done a very commendable act by saying that it will participate in a charter capital increase 1-for-1. It'll have a good footing for any eventual international flight recovery activity, outbound tourism, as well as what I've witnessed, the increasing within Vietnamese sovereign territory travel that's been going on. A lot of people are getting back onto, the Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi business tour flights, and then also getting onto the recreational destination flights now as well, back to Da Nang, back to Phu Quoc, back to Nha Trang as well. So I think you're right, that will be an area to look at. Whether or not people will deep dive into some of the privately funded airlines is another matter, but I think the state-backed airline is definitely one that people shouldn't discount and start to have a look at.
Right.
Airports Corporation of Vietnam, to wrap things up with, where do you see ACV?
For ACV, I believe that the air services quite good, even pandemic time. I observed that some kind like the land services at the airport is very increasing their revenues significantly, at least 20%. And by the way, I just mentioned the airport services. Some kind of logistic firms also good too. The logistic firms in Vietnam, why I believe so? Because first, we have so much growth in export and import. So even the airfly is not the transport the passengers, but they can transport the exported products and imported products. And with that kind of activity, I believe that the logistic is a good candidate for the second half or for the second quarter of this year. For logistic, not only the air services, but also for the transportation, like the ports, for example. Zermatt, Saigon ports, for example. The number of the total weights through their ports increasing significantly for the first quarter, and so their income also increasing for the logistics firms. So I say that logistics firm in general and ACV, I think it's a candidate for investor to look at.
Okay, well, Mr. Minh Le, thank you very much for joining us on Mirae Asset Live. Always a pleasure to hear your insights and opinions on the markets. And we haven't really had much of a situation of recovery in Vietnam. It's been more of a case of just battling on through in a considered way. Some stocks have had a bit of profit-taking headwinds in recent weeks, mostly the top 5 of the VN index, which account for over 30% weighting of the VN30. If we discount those, there are many, many opportunities out there, like you mentioned. So look forward to speaking to you again in the coming time. Steve Brown from Mirae Asset Live. Thank you very much.